and then yes. So hi Soumya, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing fine, Rajiv. Nice to meet you. How are you?
Great. So you've got a pretty great score, 710. So how are you feeling? How did you feel when you saw that score popped up on your screen?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I was targeting a slightly higher score. I was expecting with my prep with GMATWhiz, also with the trend I was seeing during my preparation, that I would probably hit a 720, 730. But you know how it is on the day, something doesn't work somewhere. So with the 710, I was definitely relieved. I think the first word that came to my mind was relief, because I had been attempting the GMAT. I'd attempted the GMAT 3 times prior to my attempt that I took after GMATWhiz. I had not been able to cross the 700 barrier. So for me, that had become a fixation. So yeah, I guess it was a sense of relief, but also a sense that could have been a little bit better, but here we are.
Okay, great. So 3 times, that's quite an amount of work that you put in. But anyways, congratulations for such a great score, Soumya.
Thanks.
So before we get started, let's have a brief description from your side, what you do, and were you working the whole time when you were preparing? So what was the scenario over the period?
Yes, so I work with a company called SKF. I've been at one company now almost 9.5 years, which is a Swedish bearing manufacturing organization. And I am in charge of our aerospace business of SKF for India, Japan, and South Korea, with some additional responsibility for Southeast Asian countries. So I'm an engineer by education. I've done my engineering in Bangalore, and I've been working in Bangalore almost the entire time after that. But I'm originally from Calcutta, up in the Northeast. So I moved here 13 years back, and yeah, that's been my story. I have been working throughout the whole time. I didn't stop working.
Okay, great. So you managed to get this score while working full time as well. Okay,
with
great.
3 attempts, but with 4 attempts, but yes.
Okay, so how did you arrive at this decision? What was the thought process that I have to do MBA, and why now?
Well, it wasn't really a question, to be honest with you, about if. It was more a question of when. And I think a lot of the motivation came very early on from my job, where I had a very high exposure, international exposure at my job from a very early period of time, right from the beginning of my career. And so that exposed me a lot to people who had similar pre or post MBA career progressions. So it was pretty clear to me, but also even before, when I was doing my engineering, I think it's pretty obvious that after an engineering, the most chosen path is to do the MBA for most of us, right? So it wasn't really a question of, do I want to do the MBA? But there was the question of, do I want to do it in India, or do I want to do it abroad? And for me, again, based on the exposure that I received, I felt I could leverage a lot more my work experience if I could pursue a degree abroad, because also probably this will be the last time I go for a structured academic degree. I don't think I will have the opportunity to study again in a structured program after this. And so I wanted to, expose myself to a system of education that's a little bit different from ours. Why now had I gotten the score 3 years earlier, I would have probably launched in then. So for me, the question was about getting the right score. And that's why now.
Okay, great. Great to hear such, structured thought process put behind your decision. In fact, it's a great investment that you put in your life. So you've got to have a structured thought process behind that as well. So as you said in the initial part of the conversation, that you have taken already 3 attempts. So what made you still, keep going on? Because after 3 attempts, you are like, okay, I have tried, because this belief comes into our mind that I have tried almost everything. Now, is there anything left in the market that would work for me? So what was the thought process behind that? And then we'll move on to this part that, how did you manage to get past those fears and, ventured into the new space?
That's a very good question. Yeah, because with every successive attempt, I think that happens for a lot of people who write it a lot of times. But for me, for sure, I can relate that there was a sense of, it wasn't any more, at least by my 3rd attempt, it wasn't any more about what I know and what I don't know. It was just about executing during that 3.5-hour period, right, inside the exam hall. Because my performance in mocks or my understanding of basic concepts were not in line with the score that I was getting recurrently. And so that eats into your confidence, which I think is the most important aspect of this journey of the GMAT and then pursuing the MBA. There's a lot of self-doubt that crept into me, which manifested itself for me in the form of just a very panic-based reaction during the exam, right? And this happened. It didn't happen so much the first time because the first time you're new to the environment, so you're still seeping it in. But the second and the third attempts, definitely there was, for me, the added struggle of that fear factor, which, by the third attempt, at the end of my third attempt, my thought process was probably I'm pursuing something or chasing something that it's wrong. I don't think it was a question on my own capability that was becoming more and more prevalent to me during that time. Why did I persist? I think a lot of that is just personal nature. I didn't think I wanted to give up. But it was getting increasingly harder every time to still say key one more time, because it is with the job, it is, and as you progress also in your career, it becomes increasingly harder to maintain that resilience. And I think more than that, it's how for me, what it boiled down to was a lot of time management discipline, not just for the study, but also to manage when I would work, when I would study. Yeah. So my job involved a lot of travel prior to the pandemic. So that was increasingly challenging, but yeah, I think I didn't want to give up because what lay on the other side of this was I had no doubts about what promises that would hold for me, right? So it was really an attachment to that aspiration which kept me going. I forgot the second part of your question. Sorry.
Yeah, so we'll come to that, but just to summarize what, because you have provided one excellent point and an insight that could help many people out there, because people usually after 2 to 3 attempts they get bogged down, right, and they're like, okay, well, whether they should move forward or not. So there's a very important message that you have pointed out, that it's only about resilience. If you can persevere, you can make it through, but you should also have to acknowledge the weakness that you have in yourself, right? If you will keep doing same things again and again, your perseverance will not bear those fruits which you are expecting, right? So with this part only, let's move on to the second part, that, so when you realize that, you have those weaknesses, that, something is going wrong because of the attempts that you've made and the confidence level that is degrading. So how did you get past this fear? And when you realize that this thing, how did you narrow down to the other part of the journey? Like, this is what I'm supposed to do from now on. So what was that step that you took and the rationale behind it?
Yeah, so I think for my up to my third attempt, as you said, I was doing the same thing again and again and again. And clearly that plan wasn't working. But the trouble of breaking away from that is to realize, as you said, what exactly it is that is going wrong. Because you're studying all the material, you're doing all the mock tests, you're living a disciplined life, but something's not working, and it's painfully hard to put your finger on what that is. Right? And I think I must appreciate that the entire module of GMATWhiz, the way it was structured from the beginning, even before I signed up for the course, just the communication that was available, or the webinars that were being done on YouTube. I felt there was a difference in the narrative that was coming out, because it's a very infested market, you would know. There are so many GMAT Prep options available to people like us, but the narrative seems to be the same in most places, right? They don't call it that, and I'm not trying to put anyone down. They don't call it that, but there seems to be a trend at least in the options I have explored, to promote the thought that if there are these 15 tricks that you're through. That seems to be the narrative out in the market, and it's easy to fall for that, because people on this side attempting the exam it is an exam that provokes a lot of your anxiety. So if anybody comes and says, look, this is the way to do it, you tend to fall for that, you tend to believe that, right? But what I felt was unique about the interactions I had with GMATWhiz is that and this I can get into a little bit more detail probably at a later question, but I think the personalization aspect of the course, which really points to where it is that you need to focus. It sounds simple, but to be able to do it in an unmanned way, where there is an AI algorithm that's really delving deep into which part of, say, for example, geometry, coordinate geometry, which part, what kind of questions are you getting wrong consistently? Is it with circles? Is it with triangles? Is it with area problems? Or is it with perimeter problems? For instance, just as an example, I think when somebody points the light on that, that begins the process of regaining your confidence as well. Because then you know this is really where I need to focus. And it really, I mean, if you really made up your mind to go for the GMAT, chances are that you're not, you won't struggle with the material. You've taken a decision being cognizant of what the process would entail. So it's not to say that you don't have the required intelligence or potential or knowledge, so to speak. Everybody comes with, let me say, the same baseline of knowledge, because the GMAT doesn't really require, like the IITs or the CATs, it doesn't require hardcore, intense calculus subject matter knowledge. So just your basic English, basic math is enough. But what it really does require you to bring to the table is a lot of presence of mind, right? And that goes away when you start feeling less confident. And so for me, that it was about that part of the GMATWhiz module that really helped me to regain my confidence and proceed on to try it a fourth time.
Great, great. So after 30 attempts, when you took a plunge again and you had an encounter with GMATWhiz, this personalization, attracted you a lot, that how you're going to improve. So apart from the personalization, what else was different from in your preparation before when you were preparing during your 3 attempts, and what changed in the 4th attempt in your preparation?
So I think the most important thing that was missing prior to my attempt with GMATWhiz was structure, right?
Great.
There is, and I think it's underrated. The importance of structure in the prep for the GMAT is underrated. It's extremely important to be able to develop a high-level view of what competencies you need to bring to the day of the exam, right? The syllabus, the course material, it's not like the system that we are used to, that you have the first 5 units for the first term exam or so on, right? There's no prescribed syllabus as such. So what we struggle with, and hence what we fall back to, is a lot of material that's not really relevant. Because in our approach to, let me say, mathematics, in our approach to geometry, in our schooling system, we take a very ground-up approach of understanding what is a triangle, how do you calculate the area, and so on. But these are basics that you don't really need to delve into. These are things you already know. The formula of the area of a triangle, for instance. It's about recognizing when you need that half base into height formula. It's about developing a third eye, really, right? And that's the skill that I think that was missing for me, which I think the GMATWhiz material really helped me sort of develop and make as a strong muscle, I can say. Yeah. So the other thing I think also was, along with the structure, was, I think, a reliable base of material to go through, right? Because when you start, the most common thing to hear is go through the OGs, and then there are these question banks, and you realize in hindsight that all these question banks are filled of those trick questions, which you will only need for that one question, but you will never be able to apply on the day of the exam, nor will you remember on the day of the exam. So it's more about building the general muscle. Like I said, it's very important to develop that vision about what it is exactly the question is asking me, because typically GMAT questions will try to put you on different tracks, and you need to identify which is the track I want to pursue, right? To solve that question in 60 seconds or whatever it is. And once you develop that vision, then your confidence comes back automatically. And that, I think, was what was very crucial for me that I received from the GMATWhiz course. And the other third aspect, which I probably didn't know as much enough about when I signed up, was the one-to-one, the counseling and the one-to-one approachability of the tutor for English or the tutor for math. I would do early morning study. The mentorship, right? So I would do early morning study before going to office, and I would have a couple of doubts. I would put out my doubts through the system. By the time I was back from office, there was a very clear explanation, and it helped me to, because if you don't tend back to your doubt, you forget what your doubt was, and you forget what is required to clear that doubt. But when it comes back to you the same day, it is to be appreciated. The turnaround time being very short is very important in that case, right? And that's something that was very consistent about the GMATWhiz module and the program. So that's again the third thing I think that I really appreciate about GMATWhiz.
Great.
Right. So as I was saying, so I think if I can summarize that, the three aspects of the GMATWhiz program that really appealed to me. One was, as I said, the personalization aspect of it, to understand what really is my problem. The second was the structured material, which also helped me to apply the concepts, because it's important to identify between what the concept is and how to apply it. And the structure of the GMATWhiz module really helps you to distinguish between this is the concept and this is how you apply it. And so that was something I really appreciated. And the third was the mentorship program, the doubt clearing aspect of the program, which was very much in real time, very much responsive to the needs of the specific question of the student, and therefore not generic at all. So these were the three things that really helped me.
Great to hear such structured thoughts that you have laid out in front. So let's dig a level deep and see. Okay, so when you speak about this, this application of concepts part, because I think you have taken 3 attempts in GMAT, and by that time you would have been aware of almost various checkpoints or various things, various traps that GMAT lays out. In fact, so how did you find those structures? So what is that application of concepts that you found different over here in GMATWhiz, and how did your approach to solving question, or how did your strategy to solving question changed?
I think I go back to what I was trying to expand a little bit upon earlier, which is about developing that vision, right? What I think the structure helped me do is I think this is easier to explain with questions, but it won't come to my mind right now. But I think what it really helped me do is to read between the lines of the question to get a reliable enough sense of which direction I want to start solving this problem along. For me, the biggest struggle was, in fact, quant, not so much verbal, right? Okay. Of course, there was a part of verbal, which was critical reasoning, that I really was able to improve through GMATWhiz. But for me, my traditional struggle has been with quant, although I'm an engineer. And that for me, again, it wasn't a matter of not knowing the subject matter, but it was really a matter of knowing what part of the subject matter to apply when. I think what really helped in the quant modules of GMATWhiz is that each topic was treated in a very sequential method, wherein if you are first being treated to concept A, it is being ensured that your application of concept A is foolproof before you move to concept B, which builds on concept A, right? And it's important to do that chronologically, and it's also important to be aware of the fact that that is the chronology. Okay. Because when in my previous experiences, the way I was preparing, I was probably touching upon the same concepts, but not in that order, and hence was missing out on basic concepts that would help me build up to the more advanced concept for the higher level questions, the 700 level questions, so to speak. So many times it was a shot in the dark, which is a criminal offense on the GMAT. You can never take a shot in the dark, right? And you won't even know if it went well or not, right? Till it gets really bad, right? So I think it was that sequential thinking process that it encountered over the period of each module, and it has to be appreciated the consistency with which that was done. It's probably easier to build that chronology in your learning in a subject like geometry, probably harder to build it in a subject like permutation combination, but the consistency with which it was done across all the quant topics, right? That's really what helped me rebuild a lot of my confidence.
Great insights. So we'll delve one more, on one more topic that you just mentioned in between there. You said that, in CR also you were able to get past some of the hurdles that you were facing a lot maybe in the earlier part of your journey. So let's dig in deep over there. What were those exact strategies that helped you that helped you sail through this hurdle of CR?
I think for me in CR, it was really about fragmenting what I was reading, which is not what I was doing earlier. I think that's the one important tip that came very early on through the module that was very helpful for me. Because in CR, my tendency was to read the entire paragraph or the entire text and then, start to think backwards. But what I learned through, and I think this also, now that I say it, I think it also helped me a lot in RC. Probably not that I'm as aware about it as I am with CR, is that active reading for me was not a habit. Like I said, I was reading the whole thing and then going back to what I thought I understood. Whereas the way I was taught to read was to read it in fragments, ensure what is the complete meaning of the first fragment to be able to understand how it relates to the meaning of the second fragment. So by the time so where that helped me also in time management is that it reduced my need to go back to read again and again and again, which is again a trap that a lot of us fall into, right? And that loses you a lot of your time, right? So I think that was the most key element for me as far as the GMATWhiz CR module is concerned.
Great. So even I had this follow-up question: what is the difference between active reading and do? So as you have already mentioned, and won't you end up spending more time when you are actually reading slowly and fragmenting the sentence? But then you eventually answered it that you compensate it from the fact that you have to reread it and come back again. That was a great thing. So okay, so this was there was this strategy that you have mentioned about. So also, okay.
And I think there was another point that I wanted to add as far as the CR module of GMATWhiz is concerned, which is the framework-driven segregation of different kinds of CR questions, which was completely new to me. I had never seen it before. That contributed to my ability to read actively, because while I was reading the text, I was also able to put it into one of those 5 or 6 buckets. That this is a question of this framework or the second framework, and that automatically triggered the algorithm that I wanted to apply to that CR question, which was also very much from the GMATWhiz CR module, right? I did not know that it was possible to really segregate CR questions into broad categories, but that really helped to. That also helped to save you time eventually, because you didn't have to sit and wait and guess about what the answer would be. So yes, that was also very important.
Great. So you were able to put almost every argument in one of the frameworks and begin your analysis while you are reading rather than after you have read the prompt, right? So that helped you escalate the process as well. So that's how you went to sail through that. Great to hear such insights from you. So we have covered all the, let's say you began learning the concepts, then you said you covered the application part, improved on your strategy, and then then the third part that you also mentioned was eliminating the weaknesses, which AI pointed out, it pointed out the exact location that Soumya, there's the weakness in maybe in geometry in that particular kind of question. So what were the kind of modules that you practiced from? So how was there's one point that AI was able to pinpoint those locations. Now, another point is that, to work on those points. So how did you work on those points?
So I think it was done in 2 ways. And again, it's a good follow-up question. The first is when the AI sees that you're making one consistent type of error. Within the module itself, you get at least 3 or 5 questions pointing to the same error, or with the possibility of you making the same error. With that, you build muscle for that error, right? If you make one mistake once and somebody tells you it's a mistake, chances are you'll repeat it. But if you make the mistake once and somebody tells you, look, here are 5 other ways where you could have made the same mistake, fallen into the same trap, and you practice that 5 times, it's like going to gym. You build that muscle and then it stays strong, right? So that's integrated within the module. And then what I really appreciated, the other component of the material that I really appreciated was the quizzer, where then knowing that these are the type of questions where I'm prone to making errors, I can customize a quiz filled with those kind of questions of the difficulty level that I want from that specific subtopic of that topic or of that larger, broader area. And then you can just practice that aspect of it again and again and again. And then that, I think, also really, again, contributed a lot to rebuilding the confidence that I was losing earlier on.
Great to hear. So now everything is said and done. You have improved, you have taken mocks. So now, did you take GMATWhiz mocks as well?
I think the reason, I think towards the end, I had to rush a little bit. This is not good advice. I wouldn't recommend what I did to anybody else. I was not able to give enough time to the number of mocks that I wanted to take. I did take a couple, and then I also took a few of the GMAT Club access, which Sakib had given me for one. But yeah, I think one part of my preparation that I did lack in was enough mock practice.
Okay,
So
great.
I would surely recommend that viewers invest a little more time.
Rush through the course and give it a more quality experience rather than being a quantitative. Right, great. So now when you are sitting in the exam, what do you think will be, I would love to know some important insights from test taking strategies perspective. What would you like to give advice to people out there, while taking tests, what they should keep in mind while attempting questions?
I think this is it's a personal thing. It will change from person to person. So I can only speak from my experience. It may not apply to a lot of people. But for me, the biggest struggle during the exam, what was changing between my mocks and when I was going to the exam hall was the mindset, right? Okay. While I was giving the mocks, my mindset was a little bit more free. I was a little bit more bold, a little bit higher risk appetite while I was taking the mocks. But I felt I was being too conservative on the day of the exam while taking the exam, and that was affecting my mindset. And it's really a test of your mindset. If you falter the first 30 minutes, chances are the rest of your exam will bomb, right? So whatever helps you to get into that zen that you need to give your best, you need to do that days before the exam. It's very tempting to keep reading and keep studying and keep taking mocks before the exam, but the last 5 days before the exam, I did nothing at all, right? I didn't. That worked for me. That may not work for anybody else, but it's important to have that conversation with yourself prior to the exam about why you're doing this, because with the job, as you asked in the beginning, it's not easy to stay motivated to do it. So if you keep reminding yourself of what your reasons are to pursue this path, I think that will help you to stay in the right mindset. And yeah, that's what worked for me.
Great. So mindset is the key. Nice to hear those words. So finally, you're done and dusted with GMAT. So are you planning to apply to MBA this year or next year? And which schools are you planning to apply?
Yeah, no, so I'm at the end of all of that process. I am, in fact, beginning my MBA in January. I got admission at IMD in Switzerland, Lausanne. So I went through the application. The reason why I was rushing a little bit last year is because my third attempt was prior to the round 1 deadlines. I didn't get the right score, so I had to move it to my second attempt, but to the round 2 deadlines, and that's when I worked with GMATWhiz for my last attempt, just before. So I took the exam in December, and the deadlines were 1 month later, right? So I finished applying to all the schools, and I have chosen to go to IMD, where I will start.
Great. IMD is a great school, especially for industry professionals and seeking career in the same domain, right? So great to hear such such helpful insights from your end, and all the best for your future endeavors in the IMD journey. And thank you, Soumya, for taking out some time and joining us and providing such helpful insights. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Raju. Have a nice day. Nice talking.
Thank you.